Chapter 4. The Herb Gatherers. Time passed. The Roman Empire crumbled. New kingdoms grew, new wars were fought. The parchment scrolls on which Aristotle's researches were recorded were scattered, and most of them lost. Though the Mohammedan scholars in Spain and northern Africa and the Hebrew students in Palestine still read them, in Europe people continued to talk of Aristotle as if he were some kind of god. But few knew much about his work, and no one thought of following his methods. Pliny was much more popular. His books were copied and recopied, his sayings quoted over and over again, for people are generally more interested in the curious than in the scientific. And every year, through all the time that has been called the Dark Ages, soft blooms lighted up the hillsides and the meadows every spring. Frogs croaked in the ponds, birds built their nests and laid their eggs. Every year the beavers built their dams and swam back and forth across the pond with sticks to build their houses. Every year the deer slept on the sunny hillsides in the daylight and roamed through the forests at night. Every year the fish flashed in the rivers. During the Middle Ages, no heed was paid to the living things that were man's companions. The animals were thought to be in the devil's keeping, and the plant life was taken for granted. There was, however, an exception to this. The herb gatherers had to know one plant from another. No one thought much of their profession, to be sure. The practice of medicine in those days was thought not respectable. Doctors and magicians were classed together. Still, if men were sick, they needed cures, and the herbs were the materia medica. Sometimes a physician went out in search of his, quote, simples, unquote, himself, but more often herb gatherers ranged through the forests and meadows collecting the various plants and roots that were on the list of medicines, and selling them to the doctors. The monasteries sent out a great many monks on this quest too, for every religious house kept a good supply of medicinal herbs, not only for the monks themselves, but for the people of the surrounding country. The herb gatherers made their way through the woods, trying to identify various plants and roots in a hit or miss way, without any classification. People generally despised them and felt contempt for their calling. They were afraid of them too, because their trade appeared to be so close to sorcery. Gathering herbs was by no means an easy task. It must have been exasperating and difficult to find the plants and roots on the medical lists. The herb gatherers did, of course, have some books called herbals to help them, queer, old, leather-bound books with parchment pages on which descriptions and drawings had been copied by hand in the monasteries over and over again. They had been taken from the Greek writings of Theophrastus and Dioscorides, and the Greek translated into Latin. Each time a work was copied, mistakes were made, so a new copy differed a little more from the original. Hence, the herbals on which the herb gatherers depended were very little like the originals. The pictures of plants in these books were more altered in copying than the text. In one drawing, a strawberry plant whose leaves characteristically appear in clusters of 3 was drawn with leaves in clusters of 4 or even 5. The runners gradually began to appear to be thorns. If the copyist had put down his brush and gone outdoors to look at the strawberry plant, he might have succeeded better, but apparently he never thought of this. There was still another difficulty which the herb gatherers had. Theophrastus and Dioscorides had described the plants they saw, which were, of course, in Greece. But in the forests of northern Europe where the herb gatherers worked, the plants and roots of Theophrastus and Dioscorides were not to be found. Apparently no one up to that time had realized that different plants grow in different localities. It was a great step forward when much later a brand new herbal was made, not a copy. Here for the first time the flowers of northern Europe were sketched and described. Here were the lilies of the valley that grew wild around Obermergau, heart's ease or wild pansy, and ragged robin, which was used as part of a secret formula by the monks of Chartreuse in making their liquor. As time passed, other herbals began to appear. Many of them are still to be seen in libraries. They show strange notions with regard to various parts of plants, but these notions were held by the best informed students of the day. It was thought quite universally that the head of a plant was in its roots, and that the flower served to cool its vapors, that the pollen was the plant's excreta, its poo, that its soul was to be found where the stem joined the roots. It was also believed in those days that God had set a mark on every plant to show how it could be useful to men, and therefore why he had created it. So a plant with leaves spotted like the liver were thought to be good for liver complications. Large quantities of little blue-flowered hepaticas were collected on this account. Plants with heart-shaped leaves would be good for heart disease. A leaf shaped like a foot would be helpful for lameness, and so it went. Of all the herbs collected in the Middle Ages, the mandrake was the most prized. It was long, forked root resembled the human form, and it was inferred that this root would cure any part of the human body. It was a powerful narcotic and was used to dull pain, but more than this, people used it in making love potions, and they thought it would increase wealth and overcome barrenness. People Perhaps because the mandrake root looked so much like a little man, there were all sorts of superstitions about gathering it. Some said it would bring bad luck to him who pulled it up. Some said that it would scream when it was drawn from the ground. For these reasons, careful directions were set down for gathering the mandrake root. One herbal directed, quote, "Thou shalt in the manner take it, when thou comest to it, then thou understandest it by this, that it shineth at night altogether like a lamp. When first thou seest its head, then inscribe, encircle, thou it instantly with iron, lest it fly from thee. Its virtue is so mickle and so famous that it will immediately flee from an unclean man when he cometh to it. Hence, as we said before, inscribe it with iron, and so shalt thou delve about it, as that thou touch it not with the iron, but thou shalt earnestly with an ivory staff delve the earth. And when thou seest its hands and its feet, then tie thou it up. Then take the other end and tie it to a dog's neck, so that the hound be hungry. Next cast meat before him, so that he may not reach it, except he jerk up the wart with him." Later the herbal says, quote, "If this wart is said that it hath so mickle might, that what thing soever tuggeth it up, that it shall soon in the same manner be deceived. Therefore, as soon as thou see that it be jerked up, and have possession of it, take it immediately in hand, and twist it, and wring the ooze out of its leaves into a glass ampulla." Unquote. So eager were the herb gatherers to get mandrake roots, and so difficult and frightening were these to procure, that sometimes they tried to make their other roots look like men. One Turner, in his herbal, was very scornful of this practice. Quote, "The roots which are counterfeited and make like little puppets and mammoths, which come to be sold in England in boxes, with hair and such form as a man hath, are nothing else but foolish trifles, and not natural. For they are so trimmed of crafty thieves to mock the poor people withal, and to rob them both of their wit and their money. I have in my time at divers times taken up the roots of a mandrake out of the ground, but I never saw any such thing upon or in them as they are in and upon the peddlers' roots that are commonly to be sold in boxes." To the herb gatherers moving back and forth across the swamps and through the thickets of northern Europe, every plant and every root was a blessing and a curse to men, a cure of ills, a source of wealth, a thing of fearful mystery and dread. But as time passed, more and more men broke free from superstition and began to collect plants in order to study them. A monk in Germany left his monastery and set off on a long journey to collect material to make an herbal. There was also a rich old gentleman who employed an artist to accompany him while he went botanizing in the East. Their names are now forgotten. But though gradually men were beginning to put aside the superstitions that had surrounded plants for so long, they had not yet found out much about them. They would have been surprised to learn that all the herbs and roots had not been created for the delight of the healthy and the comfort and life of the sick, but were part of the world in which men and all other living things are joined.